All right, can everybody hear me? Is that good? Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's 5:33. We'll go ahead and get started, and as people come in, they can join us, and we'll keep moving, though. I want to be respectful of your time. So, thank you for coming back. This is the next version of moving our housing policy forward. Go ahead, if you would, please. If you remember last time, we talked about tax delinquent property, and we started talking about things like what direction would we go? Would we go after out-of-town landlords? Would we go after vacant houses that, again, wouldn't affect anybody? And then we talked about vacant land, said maybe we want to let that sit a little longer unless we have a plan for it. That all makes sense. And so we'll continue to work that in. And I think as you get to about number 5 or number 6 down this, you'll start to see how they start overlapping with each other. And the idea is to take all these notes from these sessions, all these concepts, and start rolling them into one policy that at the end will say, this is what I got out of these 10 sessions. Is that what you heard in these 10 sessions? And how do we start massaging this into something so that the entire community can then look at it and say, yeah, this makes sense for us, or no, it doesn't. One of the things that we talked about last time when Walter Leap was talking, in 2006, there was a thing called the Purple Book that was done. It was an analysis of all of our neighborhoods in Middletown. You should have gotten a copy of that tonight. If you didn't, there's one out there at the table waiting for you. I'll get Walter his original back. It's going to show you a lot of, this was done right before the recession. It's going to look an awful lot like it did in 1963, an awful lot like it did in 2006, an awful lot like it did last year when it's the same neighborhoods, have the same problems, have the same, and so here's another look at it. Again, we try to give you as much information as we can so that you guys have, different frames, different contexts to look at this and think about it and talk about it, about what we should be doing. So tonight we're going to talk about vacant residential property, vacant houses. The next one we'll talk about land, but this is vacant houses, vacant housing units in the city of Middletown. Go ahead, please. The census just in the last 2 weeks updated their estimates from 2015 numbers to 2016 numbers. So I grabbed the new stuff, which means if you saw stuff 6 months ago, that was 2015 numbers. This is the very latest, literally published 2 weeks ago. Says that Middletown has 3,401 vacant housing units. That is houses, condos, apartments, any place where a person could move in and live. They said we have 3,401. That seems a little high to me, but it's high in Middletown. And the first thing to talk about is that there are some really natural, legitimate vacancies that happen all the time. There's a house for sale and the family's got transferred for a job. House is for sale, it's sitting vacant, it's for sale. As soon as it's sold, it'll be somebody move in. Normal stuff. Rentals between tenants. Not only they moved out and he hasn't rented it yet, but let's say Steve has a rental and he's rented it for 3 or 4 years and he goes, you know what, I'm going to take about 90 days and I'm going to do some renovations and just put in new cabinets and this and that. What's going to sit for that 90 days? He's not trying to rent it, he's working on it. Those are all natural things. We have a surprising number of people who are snowbirds, who are retirees, who close up their house somewhere around Thanksgiving, go down to Florida until somewhere around March, and they come back and their house sits vacant for 4 months of the year, 5 months of the year, however long they're gone. Natural, normal, choice, no problem with that. So that's really not what we're talking about tonight. We're talking about stuff that's, I'll call unnaturally vacant, that's vacant and nothing's being done with it in any way. Go ahead, please. Can you punch me? Thanks. So the first thing I'd like before we get into the details is talk about what our code already says we should be doing with vacant residential property. And go ahead, please. The Ohio Fire Code, and I won't read this all to you, it's in your materials, but basically when we have a vacant house in the city of Middletown that's not for sale, that's not for whatever, our code and the fire code says we should board it up and make sure that people can't get access to it. And we do that. Go ahead, please. Then in the the International Property Maintenance Code, which is the property maintenance code that the city adopted several years ago, says that anything that's unfit for human habitation or occupancy, which includes vacancy, but it also includes if the water is turned off A house is considered uninhabitable for human. You can't move into a house with no running water. We have people that do, but that's our code says you cannot occupy a house without running water. That the code enforcement, Larry Tuttle, is supposed to either demolish or make it repaired during the period that that's going on. We board it up so that people can't get in and do bad things to it. We have not enforced this part of our code. We do spend $25,000 a year boarding vacant property every year. That's been going on at least 10 years since I was in community revitalization. We've spent $25,000 a year boarding. Our code says that if you can only board a property up for 1 year, and at that point, if it isn't ready to go and reoccupied, it's subject to demolition. If you go 2 years and you don't do anything at all to it, it just sits there, it's subject to demolition. We've never enforced that part of our code because people said we're mean and we're Big Brother stepping in too much. But our code currently says you can't board it up for more than a year, and if you haven't got it ready to be occupied after 2 years, we're supposed to knock it down under our code. We've, again, not pushed that part of our code very often. Go ahead.
This code's based on your national.
This is the exact property maintenance code provision, right out of, that is word for word. Yeah.
But it's also, we've adopted it.
We have adopted it, yes. This is our code. This is what we were supposed to be doing. Yeah, I know people say we're mean and hard and harsh. We don't enforce a lot of our code because of exactly those complaints. But that's what our code says. So question number one is, how do we compare to other areas? And the answer is, according to the US Census, this is all US Census data, which is self-reported by people who live in the area. It's not my numbers, it's census numbers. We're at 3,401 vacant housing units. That's 14.8% of our total housing stock. All of Butler County is at 9.6%, and which means because we're at 14.8, we actually drive that 9.6 up to 9.6. It's probably lower if you take Middletown out. Ohio as a state is at 10.6% vacancy, so you can see we're roughly 5% higher on our vacancy rate than other communities in Butler County and in Ohio. Go ahead, please. So the question is, what does this do to us financially? That's our second question. This is conceptual stuff, and I'll talk about this all in all. This is taking our number, our total housing units. If we were at 9.6% vacancy instead of 14.8% vacancy, we would have another 1,195 housing units occupied at all times. If we look like Ohio at 10.6%, we'd have another 965 housing units occupied at all times, which means we are about 1,000 vacant units ahead of different than the rest of Butler County and the rest of the state of Ohio. So go ahead, please. So then the question is, what does that do to us financially? Again, this is for discussion, because this is, and I'll back into some of that. But if you took 1,195 families at this median income for the city of Middletown, which is $36,898 times 1.75%, those 1,195 homes would generate $771,000 additional income tax dollars every single year that they were occupied. If we were at the Ohio at 10.6%, it'd be another $623,000, which means we could pave 3 more streets every year just by occupying homes similar to Butler County and to the state of Ohio. Now that I've said that, I'll qualify those numbers. Number one, if you reoccupied those, you don't know what the actual income of those families are going to be. Obviously, if the family's at $20,000 household income, those numbers are way too high. If they're at $40,000, they're a little bit low. For discussion purposes, I took a number that I knew was real, which was what the census said is our median family income. That's where those numbers came from. Second piece is, there's 2 ways to reduce vacancy. Number one is to fill those homes with tax-paying people. Number 2 is to demolish some of those, because if I have this many vacant, or this many occupied and this many vacant, and I start reducing vacancies, obviously our occupancy percentage starts going up. So again, if you demolish homes, you don't get any income tax. So again, this is conceptually though, this is just to talk about, do we want to reoccupy homes? How many? Why would we do that? What does it do to us if we do that? And so that's the idea, is just to give you conceptually. Again, there's all kinds of ways that those numbers are going to be manipulated by reality. whether we demolish, whether we renovate, the income of the family, how long they sit vacant, all of that's going to be part of our discussion. Go ahead, please. One of the things I gave you tonight is community blight solutions. You can read this later if you want to. It's a newer article about the cost of vacant abandoned homes and what they do to a neighborhood. They don't have that? Oh, it's on the webpage. It's on the webpage. You want to run some copies? We'll have this for you here in a few minutes. This is, again, conceptually, this is for discussion purposes. It says a typical foreclosed home imposes costs of $170,000. I'm not sure in Middletown that's exactly true. That's probably less than that. A lot of it attributable to the property being vacant and the condition in which the vacant house is kept. That makes sense. Over half of the total cost of a foreclosure's impact on the neighborhood comes from the fact that it's abandoned. They involve increases in violent crime. The highest plateau is in the 12 to 18 month period, which means there's a much higher chance of crime being committed at that during the first 18 months that it's vacant. 1 in 14 residential fires occurs in vacant residential buildings, especially during the recession. That was a huge problem for us because we had people who were homeless who were going into all the vacant houses. They were trying to light a fire to stay warm, and invariably about once a month they set one on fire and burned it to the ground. We had that going on 2008, 2009, 2010, happening all the time. Again, we'll get you a copy of this. It's worth reading for a conceptual piece. I don't know if I'm going to say one-to-one, this is exactly what's going on in Middletown, but when you talk about an increase in crime, an increase in fires, or a decrease in property values, those are concepts that I think are relevant to what we do and how vacant property fits into some of those. So again, it's worth reading, but read it as a conceptual, okay, what does vacant property do to us, and do we care, and what should we be doing about it? Go ahead, please. So here's the next question. Do vacant homes that are code compliant, do they matter? This is not a rhetorical question. I want people to weigh in on this. There are two houses, the one on the top left and the one on the bottom right. If the property on the top up there is property maintenance code compliant, their property taxes are paid, the utilities are current, and they keep the property in that condition, and they just choose to leave it vacant for 5 years, does the city have anything to say about that? And that's really do you as a city care if that's going? The one on the right's a little easier. We want them to cut their grass. But the question becomes, house at the top, if you as an owner choose to let that sit, do I have anything to say about it?
You're not breaking the law.
Not breaking the law, absolutely. Okay, let's go ahead. Does it matter how long it sits? And the reason I say that is, let's say it's a $150,000 home. If it sits for 2 years, if it sits for 5 years, sits for 10 years.
As long as the property taxes are paid, you can't do anything about the income tax.
Well, we'll get into that. I can. Question is, should we? But that's the question. At some point, is it causing the neighborhood any problem? Probably not. Is it affecting property values? Not in that condition, probably. We are losing income tax. It's a $150,000 house. I made that number up. But it's sitting for 10 years. Is there a point where we want somebody to occupy that house because we want the income taxes so that we can pave more streets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I think there you'd be overstepping your boundaries as the government, telling people that they have to get somebody in.
That's a perfectly acceptable policy.
You have an income earner there, if it's a retiree.
Well, even a retiree is going to give us something. If they're on a $40,000 income on the retirement, or it's a $150,000 house, they're on some kind of a pension or Social Security or something. They're going to owe us something. I don't disagree. I know it. Some of it, yeah.
Well, I think the percentage of that actual scenario is probably slim to none, where you're going to have a nice house sitting vacant
Right.
for many years. I don't see that happening.
Not often.
Not often.
I don't disagree. But that's like I said, this is where we want to start talking about where's the line where the government should get involved.
That's what I was gonna ask, how many houses do you actually have like that?
I don't know. I know how many are vacant. I know where the water's turned off, but as far as matching them up, like that, probably very few. But you may have some $50,000 houses that are in pretty solid shape that they keep the grass mowed. You know, I mean, it's not a $200,000 house, but again, there's a lot of solid, like over at Sunset Park or even on the south end, you know, it's a nice $60,000, $70,000 house. It's in good shape. Grass is mowed, property tax is paid, sitting empty.
You know, what happens with that is, flip it over to the commercial side, the AK headquarters,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
international building,
Right.
so now what do you do?
Yeah. And that's the question is, what is the balance between our needs for paving and parks and all of that? Because that house is sitting empty, and if it was occupied with a family that was making $40,000, $50,000, whatever, and you had 1,000 of them, that's real money. I'm not saying we should or shouldn't, but those are the kind of questions that we want to talk about. Go ahead, please. We've got a lot of tools that we can use for vacancy. We talked a little bit before about using the land bank with the delinquent taxes. If I can seize a home through the land bank through delinquent taxes, comes to me free and clear of title, we can give it to a flipper. I went through that program a little bit last time. There are some pilot programs that we've been working on over the last year or so, kind of getting ready to gear up for this process. Self came to us, I don't know, 6 to 9 months ago and said, there's a house on Lafayette that you took in the land bank. We have a construction trade program where we teach people to be carpenters, electricians, and plumbers. Would you consider donating that house to us? We'll renovate it. We're going to put a homeowner in it, and then we're going to sell it, and we're going to take the money from the sales, and we're going to invest it in our trade program to train more people to be carpenters and plumbers and all that. And so we said, yeah, we'll try that once and see how it works, and they're renovating that, and we'll go through that process. Butler Tech is working on a similar program through the state of Ohio. They have not started a house yet, but they've contacted us about, we'd like to do something like that too through Butler Tech's programs where we can teach people trades. Would the city be interested? And I said, well, we do it with Self, if conceptually, yes. Institutional, Atrium Medical Center came into contact, and I don't know whether somebody donated houses to pay off their medical bills. I don't know how they got these houses, but over in the Sherman neighborhood, the Atrium Foundation has 3 or 4 houses that they have come into title with. And what they have done over the last couple years is every time the rent comes in on that house, they reinvest it into the house. They put new windows in, they put new roof on, they put new HVAC, and they upgrade those houses along the way. I was talking to the foundation a few months ago, and I said, we're doing this thing now with our housing. If we end up in that neighborhood and we find some more houses that are empty, would you be interested in doing more of those houses with your money? Atrium said, conceptually, yes. Come see us when you get a little closer. But so there are different ways out there that we could get those houses put back in place if they're not property maintenance code compliance, if there are some renovations that need to be done before they're occupied. We can do it with the private sector, we can do it with the nonprofit sector, the institutional sector, the educational sector. And in theory, if you could get a number of these going, you would have all of them doing things throughout the city. Yes, sir.
How can we do it where, you know, I'm listening to you talk about the Butler Tech. I think that's a good idea, and these houses in the land bank. But what about private investors like me where is it something like, okay, we'll sell it to you, Dickie, for $1. You rehab it, you put it on the market, but then some of the proceeds, let's say 5%, 10%, go back to the city of Middletown.
Or one of the education partners or whatever.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
That way.
Could go to gateway enhancements. Could go to gateway enhancements in the neighborhood.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
This is something where it's going to be a win-win for the city,
Yep.
for the community, for the investor.
I agree. All those are possible, and that's, like I said, that's part of the program we'll be putting together as we start going through all this. Down payment assistance, we have a down payment assistance using home funds now. My guess is as we get down to the end of this process, we will refine that program and we'll talk about trying to get down payment assistance for specific types of things that we want to do. We haven't defined those yet. Could be we're renovating this neighborhood, so we want to make sure that homes are getting sold here quickly. So we're going to do something to help. Could be a certain type of home that we're trying to get done, even no matter where it is. Again, as we get going, but there are down payment assistance that we could use to say that home's empty and we'd really like it occupied, and we're willing to put some down payment assistance to help get it occupied more quickly than it would otherwise. The city of Hamilton has used interns for several years. It started out, I believe, at the Mercantile Building, but it could be used in Middletown in any way we would do it. That concept was, instead of paying an intern $15 an hour to do whatever it is we're paying them $15 an hour to do, we would pay them $10 an hour and provide housing for them. And the concept is that you could get a house for almost nothing, you could do a lot of work and it doesn't cost us a lot, the house is occupied, and on the short term, if it's not ready to be sold yet or we have some other, it's done. One of the things that was cool about Hamilton's interns when I talked to Joshua Smith was he said, and I'm not going to get the number exactly right because I don't remember it, but it was something like 7 out of 10 of their interns at the end of their internship thought that Hamilton was such a cool city where they were working that they moved to another place in Hamilton and they stayed in the city, and that made that their home. So again, if you've got places that are ready, that aren't ready for sale, that whatever, but it sure would be great if we had somebody living there on a day-to-day basis, keeping it up. You could use city interns. You could do some things like that. Housing to professionals, there's a lot of programs out there that I've got in my little binder of using down payment or promoting homes to city employees, police and fire. Let's have our police and fire move back to Middletown. School teachers. Let's get our school teachers moving back to Middletown. Hospital employees. How about if AK needs an engineer and we could provide housing as part of their program to lure people to come to Middletown to fill the higher paying jobs that we've got. Whatever, we could target it in any way we want to, any trade, any industry, whatever it is that we thought would help us. But again, you could apply that housing incentives to a specific group of people to try to draw them to the city. There's lease-to-own programs out there. During the recession, there was a lot of people that were working but lost their homes. And they're working now again, and they're making good money, but their credit was so badly damaged during the recession that they can't buy a home anymore. There are programs that I've got out there that would go through like a Lifespan or a neighborhood housing services, some type of a nonprofit, and the concept is we seize the house in the land bank, we renovate it, and we're going to put somebody in there, and they're going to rent that house for 2 years, and we're not going to be the landlord because we're terrible at it. Lifespan or neighborhood housing services is going to be the landlord. And they're going to take that $800 rent and $200 of it each month is going to go into a bank account that will eventually be their down payment on that house. The idea is at the end of 2 years, they've been through credit counseling. People have worked with them to restore their credit. Now they have a down payment assistance. Now they can buy 2 years, 3 years, again, depending on their situation. Now you can buy that house. You can get qualified for a mortgage. You've got a down payment. There are those types of programs out there, and they've been fairly successful for people who can follow the program. Obviously, if you can't follow the program, you're not going to be successful. Land cooperative, we talked last time a little bit about like people in the reservation. If I go take somebody's house that's a $25,000 house and we're going to clear something out to get around AK's property, what are we going to do with that little old lady who owns that house? There's a concept that's used all over the country. There's one in Cincinnati that I've got some information on. It's a land cooperative, and the idea is, let's say the house in the reservation's worth $25,000 with the land. It's not, it is what it is. And I've renovated a house through the land bank over here, and that house and property is now worth $45,000, and it's a nice, cute little 3-bedroom house, whatever. And what we'll do is we'll buy them out at $25,000. You would take them over here and you say, we're going to own the land. I'm only going to sell you the house. And I'm going to sell you the house for $25,000, which means you can afford it. And now you're living in a $45,000 house. I own the land, whoever, the cooperative owns the land. And you have upgraded your housing for the same amount of investment that you had before. Again, that's operating in Cincinnati on a limited basis. There are others across the country that have taken that concept. It's something we could look at here, especially as when we get into gentrification or displacement, ways people who don't have a lot of house and give them, maybe upgrade their housing. There are renovation programs through banks and through nonprofits. There's all kinds of renovation programs to either get code compliance or energy upgrades or all kinds of stuff out there that, again, we could say, if you're going to buy this house, we're going to put X number of dollars towards energy efficiency upgrades and windows, whatever we decide as a group that we would think would be helpful. So there's a lot of things, if we knew what we were trying to do with empty houses, if we want them to be reoccupied, there's a lot of tools out there that we could say, in this neighborhood, these 4 tools on this list would work out well. In this neighborhood, maybe it's 2 other tools over here that we would use to start thinking about how we would reoccupy homes and who we want to be drawing into the city. Go ahead, please. We talked about the role of government. There are over 80 municipalities in the state of Ohio that have some type of a vacant property ordinance. There's a partial list of them. They go all over the place. The question at some point will be, do we want to look at something like that for Middletown? And if so, what might it look like? Go ahead, please. The closest thing we come to a vacant property ordinance, and this goes both for rental housing and for vacant housing, is when you sign up for water, we have a clause that we entered into the rules that say we need local contact information for the owner. And the purpose of that was always that if there's code compliance issues, there's a fire, whatever's going on, and the city needs to get a hold of you, we need to know locally how to track you down. That's about the extent of what we do. And then, once we have that information, again, if you're paying your taxes and your grass is mowed and your trash is out, and we never contact you. But if one of those things doesn't happen, theoretically, we have a local address to track somebody down, whether it's a property manager or an Ohio service person that can take service for you, whatever it is, theoretically, we have the ability to track you down. Go ahead, please. So vacant property ordinances. This is the type of stuff that vacant property ordinances around the country handle. Fees, they go from 0 to Minnesota. And as we go through some of the most crazy things I'll ever bring to your attention, Minnesota seems to be the head of crazy. In Minnesota, every house, by the 3rd year, you have to pay $15,000 a year to leave that house vacant. Because they think it adds to crime. It's been through the Minnesota Supreme Court and upheld as valid. If you're in Minnesota and you have a vacant house, on the 3rd year, it's vacant. And it's like $5,000, $10,000 every year after the 3rd year is $15,000 you pay to the city to keep that house vacant. Time to register, there's people that say, we don't care if you register until something bad happens. I have to mow your grass. Somebody did something bad property maintenance code-wise. Until then, we don't care. We don't want to hear from you. Others have a set time, 60 days, 90 days after being vacant. Others say immediately, as soon as it goes vacant, you have to register with the city and do whatever it is, pay the fee, get inspected, whatever. Inspections go from anywhere from none, we don't care. We just want to know it's vacant, so if we get a call on a fire, we're not looking for somebody inside. Something that simple. To exterior compliant, when we get about 2 or 3 meetings down, I'll get copies of this for everybody, but this silly little book is $40, so I'm probably going to make illegal copies and hand them out. The International Property Maintenance Code covers the exterior, but it also covers definitions, general, light, ventilation, and occupancy, mechanical and electrical, plumbing, fire safety. It covers all of this, and this is all adopted. This is part of the code that we're supposed to be enforcing that we do not do internally. We don't do it. We do external all the time. So some communities would say if the exterior is compliant, that's good enough for us. The interior is a mess, that's your problem. Other communities say, no, we have to come in and do an inspection, and the plumbing and the electric and the lighting and all this stuff has to be up to code, or you have to bring it up to code within a set time, or there's fines and fees and everything. You can see this goes from almost nothing to what the heck. Maintenance, boarded to fully compliant with the code. Liability insurance, none to full coverage with a copy of the certificate on file at the city. Plan for reuse, none, that's your business. Up to within 6 months, you have to have a plan to reoccupy it, and if you don't make your plan, there's fines and fees and this, and that, and the other. We get in your face and we do all kinds of stuff. Crime prevention, none. There are communities out there that say you must have external lighting that comes on at dusk and goes off at daylight, and you have to have a burglar alarm system registered with the city so that if anybody breaks into that open house, the lights are on and all of that. It goes everywhere from nothing to, again, all the way over. Yes, sir.
What do we have in place now?
We have almost nothing in place.
You know,
All we have is
I
a,
know when I had sent you where a house actually caught fire,
Mhm.
and it's on a main drag of our city on Main Street, and it's kind of like, what tool do we have other than guys like me or the residents complaining about this guy? Because it should be, if somebody's house burned down and they want to restore it, that's fine and dandy.
Mhm.
But if they're living in a house that's burnt and it ain't even habitable, we have to have something in place because it's crazy. I mean, the house, you seem like Jay Clampett.
well, and again, I can tell you, I have all the tools I need. Problem is when I start enforcing those, people come out of the woodwork. What are you doing? You racist, elitist bastard. They do.
But it's not.
Do you know how many times, there's literally been 3 times in my career here that people have said he's a racist and we want him fired. And I'm like, you've never even talked to me.
Right. I mean,
And so, but when we start to do that, everybody shows up at council. You kick that little old lady out just because she had a fire and she's having trouble renovating her house. She's trying. Well, do we enforce the code or not? I have the ability to do all kinds of stuff. But the community has to support me when I do that.
you got to look at what's best for the interest of the community.
I agree. That's my job. But when people show up and say, you're being too big of a jerk, you're pushing too hard. The house burned. She didn't have insurance. It's going to take her 3 years to renovate that because she just doesn't have that.
That's unacceptable.
Well,
I mean,
you're going to kick that poor widow out because she's poor? Atkins, you jerk.
no, I'm just saying.
But this is where we're at. This is why we're having these conversations, because when I try to do that, the community raises up. The community raises up. They want my hide. I have everything I need. All the community has to do is say, Doug, enforce the code as it's written. But then you got to say, there's an appeal process if you don't think I'm following the code. So if I misread the code and I do it wrong, you can appeal, and there's a whole board set up to say, Doug, you went too far. But that's where it comes in, is are we going to enforce our code? Are you going to let me enforce our code? Everywhere. Every part of the city. Because I have the ability. It has to be boarded up. Can't be boarded up more than a year. After 2 years of it sitting there, I can demolish it. If it's on a fire, I can give you so much time it's uninhabitable. I can kick you out. I can get a court and evict you and move you out. No problem. I have all the tools I need, and I'm an attorney. I know how to use them. But this is where...
Let me ask you this, is there any way possible that, and I'm talking specifically about the situation with a person like the old lady who had a home that was fired and she didn't have insurance. Is there any way possible that you could build in some level of insurance into some level of taxes so that every person who has a home in Middletown actually has insurance, so that if something happens, that piece of it is taken care of?
I've never heard of a government doing anything like that. That's the private sector. That's your house. It's your responsibility. If you can't afford the insurance, then you can't afford to live in that house.
And I understand that, but I mean, that's the reality of what we're dealing with here in Middletown, is people who may be poor and don't take care of business.
Yep.
And so therefore, it does look like, that you are being mean when you have to do all this. But that's what I'm saying, something out the box, creative. Those types of things are some of the things that we may have to look at if you don't want to be, which, I mean, I carry my heart on my sleeve, so I truly understand the struggle that you're dealing with, so.
So how many times do you use taxpayer dollars to do that? Why are we subsidizing all those people?
I'm not saying that we're subsidizing. I'm saying if they're paying the taxes, that they're subsidizing their own life insurance. That's what I'm saying. If they're paying taxes, but it's built into their taxes,
Okay.
their insurance.
So, and we're going to take a piece of their money out, which means there's less money for streets, there's less money for police, there's less money for fire.
It can be whatever it needs to be. I mean, whatever the insurance is, their taxes may go up. If you don't have, I mean, it's nothing different than the state saying that we are required by law to have car insurance.
Right.
There's nothing different.
But
We
if you
are
can't,
required by law
yeah,
to have that.
yes, ma'am.
When a person is still paying on a house, they have to have insurances, and a lot of times that's built in. But once they own the house,
But a lot of them
That's when
don't.
they lose
I mean,
their
they're supposed to, but you find out it's lapsed and,
But if you've got take little old lady.
Mhm.
Old lady, we'll pick one. If it's $50,000 house, property insurance on that is not gonna be very, very much.
Mhm.
It's gonna be a couple $100 a year.
probably, something like that.
So it's not a big expense. And, I mean, for them, if they're gonna own the house and it's paid off, why wouldn't they? Because they've got the extra capital to do that. If they're just lazy and don't do it,
or if they have a daughter who's spending their money out of the bank account.
I understand. Not a perfect.
Or mom died and daughter's taking the house.
Yeah.
And she didn't have two nickels to rub together.
I don't think there's a lot of those little old lady scenarios out there. I mean, I think it might be far few between. That's just my opinion.
That's hitting mama now.
Well, you got 1,276 that aren't paying their property taxes.
But how many, do we know why?
No, I don't.
See, that's what I'm saying.
Well, and that's what I'm saying, but if they're not paying their property taxes, and they're not paying their income tax, and they're not paying their water, my guess is they don't have insurance on their property either. That's gonna be one of the first things to go, would be that.
I mean, there are gonna be people, just like, for example, you gotta have, insurance on your car. How many times have you worked on someone who doesn't have insurance? I know I have, several times. Yeah.
Right?
I mean, but the tool is in place though for, like you said, there's so many people not paying their property taxes. I know when I get that thing, it says, you gotta pay your taxes. Well, if you don't, then you get cited into court. So it's something in place to say, and at that point, okay, well, why ain't you paying it? You know what I'm saying? I mean, the property taxes thing has to be enforced, no matter how you look at it. If these people aren't paying for some reason, then we cite them in the court and we find out why they're not paying. You know what I'm saying?
I don't.
So then you don't have that unknown factor, well, why can't you pay your property taxes? Well, you know, because they just went to court. So either you put them on a program, you know.
I can tell you as a former prosecutor that I bet 8 out of 10 people on the payment program did not complete the program. When I brought them in for those kind of things. 8 out of 10, that's from memory. But it was a high majority of them. For 1 or 2 months, they tried to do their thing, and then they didn't.
I know Butler County, if you don't pay them, I mean, you know, you don't pay your property taxes, they're gonna foreclose on your house.
Well, I've got 1,276 that they have not foreclosed on in Middletown. I got a whole nother bunch that they have, but those are 1,276 that are ready now that are not on Butler County's radar because they can only do so many a year. These are the hard problems with these. You know, where's the line for the city?
So you said they can only do so many,
They, yeah, yeah, the prosecutor's office can only handle so many hundred of them a year, and so they,
In Butler County.
in Butler County.
Oh, so that's how they get, that's why they keep getting skipped.
And, yep.
Pick the worst scenarios and go off those.
Okay.
Now, we could supplement that with some money to pay for extra prosecution, and we could go after these, especially the ones in Middletown.
And I want to go to a different direction here, because I just encountered this last week. How's it that Dayton, Ohio have a land, they call it a landlocked system, where these people hadn't paid their taxes, okay? And I'm about to acquire 5 properties through this, all right?
Mm-hmm.
You just go pay the taxes.
And you pay, well, yeah, basically, they didn't pay their taxes, and you could buy these houses for $500 up to $2,000, but then you buy it, but then you have to have a system in place. You gotta, hey, you gotta do this to bring this house into compliance, because most of those houses are in a distressed area, drug-infested area,
Right.
and you have to, but we're gonna go ahead and give you these houses for that amount of money, but you gotta have a plan.
That's exactly what we're talking about through the land bank. That's exactly what we're talking about.
But they're not a land, but they're called a land lot, and it's on their website. It's really kind of unique. I just
Yeah.
found out about it.
If you get any written information, send it my way if you would. Website, whatever. Yeah, I always like to hear about what creative things people are doing.
Yeah.
But, I mean, these are the issues, what,
Does it make sense to say, well, let's start somewhere? And if you start with the one that seems to be most accepted by the populace of, they're not paying the taxes, we have to foreclose. That's the start of it. That opens the door for these other things, both positive and negative, that might happen.
right?
But that's a jumping off point.
And we talked about that, I think, at the last one, about using tax foreclosure. Yes, ma'am.
Moving toward things like that, they're tearing down Vale Middle School, say.
Yes.
Okay, so when that property becomes available, is that just wanna be green space again, or can people buy
Well,
it and build it?
Actually, we're working with the city, with the school district to get control of that, and we're gonna put it out for a developer for new housing. So that's the long-term goal for that, is we're still working through how that's gonna work and how we would get a developer and what kind of housing would go in there, but yes.
I wanted to ask about the area on Central Avenue. There was like a school that was torn down.
Mm-hmm.
And then somewhere on Central, there's another.
Lincoln School.
Used to be a dental office.
Yep.
Yeah,
And it's still up.
Kinda.
I mean, what are is there any way that could be utilized for?
Yep. That's all part of this. That's why we're doing all this.
I'm just asking.
No, you're exactly right. We're actually working with the school district right now. We're talking about how we might, as part of Vale Middle School, get them to come over and knock Lincoln down at the same time. We're at step 2 of 10 of, could that work? What would it cost everybody? How would we split the costs? All that. But yeah, the idea would be
In that area are
if you
very
could,
viable houses.
right, and if you put them in nice sized lots, you could fill in, yeah.
like Garfield School, is that city, or is that school?
I don't know where that one is, because
That
I'm,
one was the one over there by Dillman's on Yankee Road. What's
The vacant lot
Alternative school.
beyond the railroad tracks, trust
oh,
me.
okay, okay.
So, it's probably still in schools, I haven't looked at that one.
But that would be closer to AK, wouldn't it?
Yeah, probably, yes.
That would probably go under that buffer zone.
Theoretically,
That would probably be.
theoretically, yeah.
It's a buffer zone.
Huh? What's the vote? Don't know what a buffer zone is.
Well, one of the things, and we're probably about 3 or 4 meetings away, is we were talking about creating, one of the things that we were saying at the beginning was you would never put housing up against the fence of an active steel mill if you were making a new city today. You would have heavy industrial, and then you'd go to light industrial, then you'd go to commercial, then you go to multifamily, and single family homes would be buffered from an active steel mill. And so one of the concepts that we said is, when you looked at the charts that were around the room, a lot of the housing up against AK has been, it's 80 to plus years old, it's 2-bedroom, it's in a high crime area, it's not property code compliant, and on. Should we create, over the next 10 to 20 years, a buffer around our heavy industrial areas where we maybe clear out those houses along the fence and put in parkland or just buffer it with green evergreens or whatever. That, again, we're going to talk down the road about, and we're literally, Ashley's working on the things, but we're going to take all the way around AK and we're going to go, how about this 8 blocks?
If you have churches over there,
Well, those are all the things, yeah. We're going to look literally on this 8 blocks, here's what's here. There's a church, there's these houses, there's this. What do we think about that? This is what 500 feet would look like. This is what 1,000 feet would look like. What do we think we should do here, if anything? It'll literally be area by area by area. Well, this is all commercial, so there is no housing up against there. We probably don't need to do anything in this block. Okay, let's go on to this block. This is housing and it's right against it, and here's what's going on with that housing. It's 80% rental, it's this, whatever, it's whatever. What should we do here? And then we're gonna go around over here. What about this, this, till we get all the way around AK and the heavy industrial areas and say, okay, over the next 10 to 20 years, what we'll do is, if we say this area of housing should go away, we'll pay attention if they go up for sale, if they get tax delinquent, if they, we'll look for opportunities to pick them off one at a time and clear them out and do whatever it is we said we wanted to do to create a buffer. That's the concept. And we're, I think, 2 meetings away from talking about that, but the idea is to start talking about all these different pieces. But that's the concept, is over the next 10 to 20 years, where would we do it, how deep would we do it, and why are we doing it, and what's the end result of doing it? Yes, ma'am.
Does that 1276 include people on repayment plans when it comes to the taxes? 'Cause I know the county's been really good about that, because we've helped a lot of homeowners on the,
I don't know the answer to that,
because I'd be curious to know.
because they send me the list that's subject, but they don't, well, my
Because I think there's
my
one-
guess is, if they send it that it's ready to go for foreclosure, my guess is they're not on a payment
Yeah,
plan.
yeah, that'd make more sense.
But I'm guessing, because I asked them for what's ready to go right now, and I assume they
So
would
most
back
likely
out.
They're either not on an agreement, or if they are,
Right.
they're not paying it like they're supposed to.
Correct. That's my guess. I'm not positive about that. If you did something with vacancy in the city, you could do it for all types of property, residential, commercial, industrial, because we have a proposal coming from Downtown Middletown, Inc. They want to do a vacant property ordinance just for downtown with some specifications in it. So you could do it again for everything and incorporate all kinds of property into it, or you could just do it for residential property. You could build in exceptions for expected vacancies. So again, if you've got a rental and it's either between tenants or it's under renovation, we're not talking about you. If it's listed on the MLS, we're not talking about you. This is the kind of thing. Do we just make sure it's property maintenance code compliant on the outside and get on with life? All of those are fine, or inside and outside. Those are the types of questions that I kind of need to know on a vacant house.
I think, at the very least, you should do whatever it takes to maintain it.
What does that mean? Does that mean exterior, interior? Does it mean,
Whatever the city's having to pay out, they should be responsible for paying.
and if we board it, we do put the boarding costs onto the taxes. If they don't pay it, it'll go delinquent. Theoretically, we could then go after it in tax foreclosure and get our money and take the house.
Yeah, and you're talking about pretty much these are the landlords, right? Or
No,
are you talking
it's
about
all over.
in general?
It's all over. It's vacant houses in general. Some are,
You have a
they
lot
could,
of vacant houses that have landlords, and then some of them are just single owners.
yes,
Why, do you know why they're vacant?
no.
People die.
People die, people move, people, it's not, they don't tell me why they chose to vacate that house. They turn off the water and nobody's there, and it is what it is. So the question is, as we have vacant property, we will get down the road to, we're going to be in this neighborhood, and when we see a vacant property in this neighborhood, we know, because this is what we're doing in this neighborhood, that we want to reoccupy these 8, and we're going to look at those tools and figure out how to use those 8 to reoccupy them, and then we're going to look at vacant land, and we're going to know what to do. But the question is, if it's going to be vacant and non-productive, and I use that term broadly, it's sitting over there and nobody's doing anything with it for 2 years, and I've boarded it, and everyone has to drive by and look at it. If it's property code compliant, do we care? External property code compliant, do we care how long that sits vacant? Yes, sir.
I will say from the banking's point of view, even if it looks good on the outside, when they go to get a loan,
Mm-hmm.
when we come in and do the inspection, if it's not up to par, we're not gonna give it a loan. And the majority of people will be FHA, which means they're a lot harder than a conventional loan. So when they come in, if it's not up to par, forget about it, so it's still gonna sit there, and it's not gonna do anything good.
So, and if it sits for 3 years and 5 years and it starts to get mold and somebody steals the air conditioner out the back, and at what point does that become a problem for the city that it now, nobody can get a loan for that house because it's never going to make an FHA. It's going to take $10,000 to make it FHA compliant on a $50,000 house. Those are the kind of things. What do we think about that? And how far is government's role to make sure that that doesn't happen? Because I'm with you. I predominantly and conceptually, I don't care if that house sits vacant, but I don't want it to deteriorate into a place where now, because now you're going to get mad at me for knocking it down. Because no bank will give anybody a loan. It's going to take $10,000 to make it. Nobody's going to put $10,000 into that $50,000 house. Blah blah blah. You know. And now, 5 years later, I'm going to say it's been sitting boarded. It's past our boarded. It's been 2 years with nothing going on. It's deteriorated. The air conditioner's gone. Now I'm going to knock it down and everybody's going to be mad at me. So what's the balance? What's the balance there? Well, but the neighborhood will. You're putting another big hole in the neighborhood, Doug.
Exactly. It's like it was a real nice house that was next door to me, you know, and they just, one day we woke up and they were over there, demolition was knocking it down.
But I can tell you when we evaluated all those homes, and I know everybody got excited, is it looked good on the outside, but when we went inside, it still had aluminum tube wiring. It still had, I mean, it was just like, it's going to cost $30,000 to put this house back together to inside and outside code compliance. Needs new it's got, you know, a 40-year-old furnace.
And then I just noticed that, like, next door to my sister's, it was a church, and they tore it down, and the demolition people, you know, like my neighborhood, they all came to my door because there was so much dust when they tore down the house next door to me.
Mm-hmm.
But the people, when they tore down the house across from Bell Middle School, which is right next to my sister's house, they put the dirt and everything perfectly back, and grass is growing. But when they put the stuff back next door to me, they just threw it in there, and they got all the rocks on top, and the good dirt's up under, and so now no grass grows. And everybody in the neighborhood is really upset because there's no grass, and no one's doing anything but coming to cut what little grass it is on the outside. But the front is all rocks.
Send it to me.
Contractor, yeah.
That's a contractor issue. That's not, it's supposed to be grassed and nice.
Yeah, but
So
it's
it-
your
that's-
contractors, so what happens?
Send us that, send the address to it.
Yeah, send the address.
Address, okay.
We'll send somebody out and sweep the rocks and,
Doug, is it possible to do a program where you can have this $50,000 house, and it's gonna take $10,000 to do it? The bones of the house are okay, but it just needs a lot of work. To say, if the city takes it, rather than spending the money on demoing it, say, we'll sell it to someone for $1.
that's, it gets back to, yeah.
But to protect the city, is there a letter of credit or a bond that can be put up?
There's a reverter, the ones that the Cleveland and Toledo and all those use, they just have a reverter. You have 6 months to do it and put it on the market. And if you don't, whatever you've done reverts back to us and you lose everything you got. And it's worked very well up there. And so again, but the question is, do we go get that house? If it's sitting there and it's a $50,000 house and it's, you know, exterior code compliant and the grass is being mowed and the property taxes are being paid, do we let that house sit for how long before it becomes a problem? And then later I have to go tear it down and people are complaining. What is the balance there between, because the answer is, yeah, seize it, give it to Dickie, 6 months later I got somebody in there. Why'd you take their house from them? Yeah, and that's what I'm asking, is as a city, how do we handle that? Where's that balance between your right as a property owner, I kept the grass mowed, done, I paid my property taxes, none of your dang business, versus, or, well, I can tell you there's one on Grand. that I have fought with since 2009. There's a house on Grand. The guy uses it for storage. It's been vacant for 10 years. He gets in and out of property maintenance code compliance. We go smack him. He hires an attorney. He does just enough to the minimum requirements of the code, and it never gets better than that. And it's the worst looking house along Grand Avenue. And the guy says, that's my property. He had cars parked there that were junk motor vehicles. They weren't properly licensed. He got them all licensed. He said, now they're properly licensed. None of your dang business. Get out of my house. Get off my yard. Don't come in here. And the answer is, it's been sitting there. No one's been doing anything except storing crap in that house for 10 years. I'm almost positive it's full of mold. And I mean, when the time comes, whenever the time comes, that house is going to probably have to come down. But the cars that are there are properly licensed. They probably have new registrations on them. And like I said, he will do whatever the absolute minimum to not get us on him. And that sits. It's been sitting for 10 years. And so these are the types of things, at what point does it become a loss of income tax and deteriorating to a place where no one's going to be able to get a loan on it? What's the balance that we try to strike as a city to be responsible without being overbearing? And that's what I'm trying to find. It's hard. Everything we touch here is hard.
Well, if the city does everything they possibly can to get that individual to come forward, sit down, look, this is what we're trying to do in the city.
Right.
Have some negotiation here, let's get something to come. And he says, thumbs his nose at you and says, well, then we know where he stands. Now I think we take the necessary action.
And then he tells all his neighbors, city's just doing that, and the neighbors all come to council and they all say, you picking on that poor guy just because he,
Exactly.
yeah.
At some point, we gotta put our big boy pants on and just do what's right.
But that's not been our policy up until now.
Well, that's why we're here.
I agree. That's why we're here, is to try to, like I said, I can always enforce the code. Are you sure? Because again, there's blowback,
Yeah,
and it all comes at me.
That sweet old aunt on your street, and you know that her house is going down, but you don't want to see her put out.
Mm-hmm.
You know her daughter, you know her granddaughter.
Right.
You know,
Yeah, watched her kids, blah, blah, on and on and on.
it goes on.
Yes, ma'am.
But, I guess for two things, on the part that she's talking about, because there have been
Slide this out just a little bit.
I know that there have been some situations where, some people have actually,
Make sure I can still go. The answer is yes. If we're going to get that, that's like three or four more down, we will get to code compliance. We have had programs over the years where we have helped people renovate. We've had self-in with group work camps. We've had Baraka do a bunch of stuff. We've done all these things. What often happens is the minute we leave and we've invested taxpayer dollars to renovate these houses, they can't keep it up. Whatever we've done, they can't maintain. So we're the last dollar spent maintaining that house, and it starts to deteriorate again. And then the question becomes, do I go back twice with your taxpayer dollars to fix somebody's house? Well, Steve would like me to fix his house too. At what point and so again, those are those kind of questions. What's the balance? Where do we say, you probably can't afford to live in that house? It's not your fault that you're poor, but you probably can't afford to live in that house. You can't keep it up. You can't pay the taxes. You can't. Well, Doug, you mean white guy taking everybody's houses away. Well, come on now. What's the balance? What do you want me to do?
They can pay the taxes, it's just sometimes they can't patch that roof.
Yeah.
Or paint the interior.
Right?
And everything else is basically okay, but then.
So I'm trying to come up with something that helps the city, that moves us forward, that fixes these neighborhoods, that is fair, but is also fair to the city.
Exactly.
And that's the balance I'm trying to strike. So that as we go forward, whatever we go forward with, the community goes, yeah, some people are going to get hurt, but for the better for the city, to get this straightened up, this is how we're going to do it. And that's the balance I'm trying to strike, is so that they don't have a council full of 80 people screaming at them, you're unfair, you're overbearing, you're jerk, you should fire Atkins. We're moving forward because, again, those neighborhoods we showed, you missed the first meeting, I showed you the 1963 map of the city of the dilapidated neighborhoods. They're the same neighborhoods 55 years later.
Yeah.
They're the exact same neighborhoods. So how do I move forward in a way that the community feels is fair, that's also fair to the city, so that we can get these neighborhoods cleaned up, so that we can get crime down, so we can get more property taxes, so I can pave your streets and have recreation and do the things you want me to do. And that's what I'm trying to find, is that balance where people are not going to come after us for doing things that are going to improve the city. And that's what makes this so hard. The answer is I got all kinds of stuff I can do. If I do everything I've got on the books, you'll lose your minds. Everybody, the entire South End would lose their mind.
Doug, is there any study, and this is a crapshoot, of the properties that aren't paying their property taxes or are delinquent? Is there any rule of thumb that says if we go after these people, X percentage will catch up?
The county probably has some of that because when they initiate, some percentage of them get on a payment plan to get out of tax foreclosure. I don't know, probably not Middletown specific, but probably Butler County. There's probably some data out there like that, you know, for every 100 they do, 27 get on a payment plan and they pull them off the list and this percentage goes forward. So, but, you know, this is the balance I'm trying to, how long do we let these sit before they go? How long do we let them sit before we foreclose on them on their taxes? How long do we let them go when they're not in code compliance, that I'm not being an overbearing jerk? The city's not overstepping. Big Brother isn't stepping in and doing all these terrible things. Well, do we want to clean up the neighborhood or not? That's really what it gets down to. Are we going to fix it or not? Because if we're not, then everybody has to just quit complaining.
Doug, back on the property taxes.
Yes, sir.
So sorry. Isn't it the county's responsibility or is it the city's responsibility?
It's a county's responsibility. There are programs out there in other parts of the state that the city would like put up money for extra prosecutors and things to move our piece forward. So there is the ability for us, number one, to request certain properties. If we're in a neighborhood, we want to target these 8, I can send those and say, we're working on this neighborhood and we'd really like to get a hold of these 8 so Dickie can renovate them all and make a lot of money and we'll get them reoccupied. And then there's also, if we wanted to go after an extra 200 of them a year and pick a number out of the air, we could figure out what the filing fees are and the cost for prosecution, and we could say, I'm willing to put $50,000 of general fund money towards filing fees and prosecution and go ahead and kick those on to the docket. So there are ways to do that. Lots of questions.
Very enlightening meeting.
Well, all of it. You see this is what I'm dealing with when I'm trying to figure out how to fix this in a way that people are going to perceive as fair. What is the balance between enforcing our code and Big Brother stepping in and being overbearing and displacing people because they're poor? And the answer is, I'm not sure where that balance is, but I'm trying to find it with this group so that we can start renovating these neighborhoods. But if they're tax delinquent, if they're not property code compliant, if, on and on and on and on, I'm going to have to take action. Are you going to let me do that?
We have to decide what we feel is going to be healthy for the city.
I agree.
Look at it from that
For
standpoint.
50 years, you haven't done that.
Right. And, I'm in a unique situation being on council, but also being a landlord. And I sit there and I'm listening to this and thinking, God, I want the city to be healthy. I want it to be prosperous. I want it to be a good investment for people. But as a landlord, I think, we've got too many rental properties.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sort of cutting my nose off to spite my face, saying, we need to get rid of a lot of the rental properties.
Yep.
But
But-
that helps the health of the city.
Right. And theoretically, 10 years down the road, you're going to get a better tenant and a higher rent, but you're going to go through pain
Right.
in the meantime.
Right.
Especially if you have certain properties that seems like the tenant changes every year,
Yeah.
and
That's
stuff like that.
an awful lot of them. in this city.
Yeah,
There's a, and I, the school gave me numbers, and I apologize, I don't remember what but there was a huge people switching schools every year, whatever that word is. And the idea is, yeah, they move every year to a different place, and they end up in a different school, and the school is saying, we have enough problems with trying to get these kids educated and all this, and now every year they're in a different school, and we're having trouble, and then we bring in the Latino kids, and they can't speak English. I know you want us to get better, but this is hard for us too. And the answer is they keep, when they attend 3 schools in 3 years.
Even the impact of Section 8, many years ago, I didn't agree with you. I thought Section 8 was the best thing since apple pie. Until I've seen the impact.
Right.
And, out of the 85 properties that I own, I only have 2 Section 8 properties because I didn't think it was that. It was really and you said this over 15 years ago.
Yeah.
You was like, I don't want it here. And I'm like, man, you're crazy. I sat there and told you.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
But when I start now, and I hate to say that because I'm not being discriminatory, because the 2 people I have Section 8 are older people.
And, I will tell you.
I won't take it.
I will tell you when we had all that Section 8 and I ran the Middletown Public Housing Agency, 85% of the people on Section 8 were just trying to get through their day and live their lives. They were not crime people, they were not problems, they were not, but when you take 3,000 public housing units with, by definition, have to be at extremely low income, which is probably under $12,000 household income a year, again, you're talking about use of services, a higher than normal use of services, and almost no income tax going to the city. And so, again, when you tie up so much, we are still at like 3 to 4 times higher in subsidized housing than the average in the state. We are still 3 to 4 times what, and that's going to stay here forever because it's Butler Metro units, it's all the low-income housing tax credit projects we did over the last 20 years. We have built it in that I can't do anything about that. But you tie all those properties up with almost no income tax coming out of it. I mean, higher use of service, almost no contribution to what we're doing.
Question, if you have what you have, you have to continue to keep taking, right? You can't limit it?
No, most of these are.
It's like the situation where the people having fights and so forth and
right.
shooting aren't even from here. They just
right.
transiting in and out,
yep. And the answer is, the Butler Metro and the low-income housing tax credit projects, they are locked in, the housing tax credits are locked in usually for 30 years. Butler Metro, until Congress changes something, it's literally an act of Congress to take down Butler Metro housing.
Because they make it a way of life.
Right. And so the answer is if I kick somebody out for fighting and shooting, we're going to find another person to put right in there.
You can't say, okay, we have 20,000 people here
yep.
that are on Section 8. We ain't taking no more.
Nope, can't do that.
And being a landlord, I've got 19 properties, and out of the 19, I've got 7 of them that have Section 8 people in them. Most of them are single mothers. There's a family. I've never had any problems with my Section 8 tenants, and that is because I don't take the first person that puts in an application. I'll go through 25 applications before I find that right person that feels good to me.
Right.
And that's the whole problem that we have right now. Landlords today, if somebody's got $200 in their pocket, they grab it right now and stick them in there. 3 weeks later, they're in eviction court.
Right.
And they're spending that $200 plus
money
to get them out.
I agree.
Plus having to go back in and fix the place up because they destroyed it in three
months.
And and I try to tell these landlords, I've got.
Can they discriminate?
Huh?
If they say, okay, I came and looked at that place and he told me no,
It's very
then he
scary.
gave it to
Yeah,
this other person.
well,
can you do that though?
Basically, I don't have to sit there and when I take their application, I says, I'm going to review it and I'm going to do check the background and check the references. And then I get more and more applicants and more applicants, and I say, oh, okay, I like that applicant. I didn't discriminate.
No.
I just looked at the numbers in the paper that they gave me, and, okay, this person, and I do a background check, and I find
Well, and
out
that's the
that-
nice thing. Steve does a financial and a criminal background check.
Right.
And so the answer is I'm denying you because you have a criminal background. I'm denying you because you've been evicted 4 times. That's why I'm denying you.
And you know,
And
the
the-
biggest problem that we have in the Section 8 program is not so much the person that is on the list that is, the name is in their name. It's the boyfriend or the,
Right.
that comes in and does all the problems.
Yep,
That's the problem.
it is.
And the one they didn't have before they moved in.
Right.
You mean a little old lady has a boyfriend?
She may.
She's lucky.
Believe it or not, sometimes he shoots a gun too. We had some like, he's 80. Yeah, and he shot somebody. Okay.
Question is, because my question is, and I've already seen it done in another city,
Yeah,
which is why I'm asking, with the Section 8 through Butler
Metro. Yeah,
that there be more self-sufficiency education. And then that way, we can build those people up in that. Because the irony is, even though we want to do all of this with the level of low-income housing that we have, there still needs to be some level of self-sufficiency education because we're not going to be able to get rid of all of that.
yeah. You're
Let me
right.
say this to that point. 3 of my women that are in my houses, 3 houses, all 3 of them started on Section 8. 2 of them are completely off of Section 8 now with jobs. And the 3rd one just got herself a job where now she was paying $14 a month on a $750 unit. She is now, because she got a job, she's paying $250 a month because now she's working at Kohl's warehouse. So, you know,
But how
how
that's
do
the thing.
it
How
comes
did
from
you get?
I didn't, it's not me.
Yeah.
It's got to come from within that individual to
Right.
say, I want to do better than this. I can't understand why people want to be on that program and have to jump through all the hoops they have to jump through to meet the standards for being on the program. But because it becomes, for so many people, a way of life, it's free money, and people today, for some reason, they just don't have that motivation to get out and better themselves. They'll just sit there and accept that government money all the time, so.
Getting back to what Tori was saying, she was talking about the education part.
Yeah.
I have neighbors that come to me and they say, Wanda, I gotta have a roof, you know, and I gotta paint my garage, but I need to get on a program. Can you tell me, and I can't give them that education, but what she was saying is if we could educate some of our neighbors of sources of where to go and what to do when they aren't in compliance.
Right.
You know, or,
Yeah.
you know, something like that. a
Now,
class.
what you're saying is good too, but also what I'm also saying is, because here's the other key that I don't think people understand. When you have people who are poverty stricken, and if they've done it all of their lives, what they're living in, I'm just reading this book called Wired for Joy. So the first part of your brain is like joy, and this right part of your brain is like kind of in between. This part of your brain is kind of medium where you start getting a little stressed. This part of your brain is where you become obsessive. But the last part is where you stress and you're frantic all the time. Majority of the people who are poor, they live in this mode.
They're in
Nothing you
crisis
say to
at all
them,
times.
They are stressed all the time. Nothing you say to them, if you say something nice to them, they're not gonna receive it because they're so stressed. So I guess, the point what I'm saying is, as it relates to educating them, the self-sufficiency with education, helping them, you know, okay, learning how to not be so stressed, learning how, because a lot of it is just not maintaining boundaries. You letting people in your life who don't even need to be in your life, you know. And some people who go to church, they kind of they learn some of those things. But I mean, when there's nothing, it's like you can't. It's just a wall.
Yeah. Is that government's role? Is that government's role?
I'm not saying it's government that we're trying to fix the city.
I'd sure
And
love
what
to
I'm saying-
have the churches take a stronger role in that.
Well, we try as hard as we
Well,
can.
and I think, you know, again,
That's
we've got
what I mean.
CBI and we've got stuff down at the community center. We've got a lot of programs and we try too, but A lot of it's getting people being receptive, willing to try. We've talked about education programs and stuff, and one of the problems we've had is when I talk to people and I go, you're working at Taco Bell, God bless you, you're doing a great job. If you would just get this 12-week certificate, we could get you up to, $20 an hour or whatever. And they go, I'd lose my house, I don't have anyone to watch my kids, I can't do anything for 12 weeks, so I'm stuck in this process. I can't better myself because there are too many other barriers, transportation, education, daycare, all these other things that I can't ever get to that. You're right, if the world would stop for 12 weeks, I could do that, but the world can't.
Who has no children, and she works from 9 to 9 all the time. I can't get her to go to the eye doctor because she says, I don't have time, Mom.
Right.
I got deadlines to meet, I got court to go to, I got this,
Right.
People can fill it up.
Yeah.
They can fill it up.
And so, and then again,
And I guess the only point that I'm saying is that there are places that are doing this self-sufficiency education. And that's the only point that I was just trying to
Yeah.
make. So.
vacant housing.
But when they're in trouble though, as far as like you say, needing a roof, needing to pay
Yep.
stuff, then they're wanting to go to these kind of classes. And I really don't know where to tell them to go to find out where they can go to, get this kind of assistance
Well,
when they're low
unfortunately,
income.
if their roof is leaking, it's probably much too late.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not saying, that they said that getting their roof repaired,
Didn't the city used to have a program?
much too late.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Didn't they used to have a program
They
in
used to
place
have a
where
program where they could.
didn't they used to, didn't the city used to have a program in place where, they would assist people at a low interest rate to get repairs done to their house? Is that still in place?
It's not because, again, almost everybody, it was using HUD money
Right,
and almost everybody defaulted.
that's what I thought.
And then
They
HUD,
always sold those loans.
well, and then HUD said, either the city can pay them back or you can foreclose and kick those people out of their houses.
So, yeah.
And so we started
Program like that.
kicking people we had helped out of their houses. I said, this was not the point of this program, was to set people up to be eventually 5 years later lose your house because we put $10,000 in at a 0% loan.
Yeah.
We were kicking people out of their houses, so I shut the program down. It's like, this is terrible. We're setting people up to lose their houses in the future.
Oh, so after five or so years, you sold their loan to another bank?
No,
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 Did that.
it's all in-house.
no, I just.
And we still have 30, 40 of those still active.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's still several that are still
I
active.
know when I did my mother's, they sold it to Fifth Third Bank after 5 years.
Hmm.
The home-
Yeah, I just
home
didn't know we
improvement
were still
loans,
doing
they-
that. I
they
knew
just said
that.
home
Yeah, the program got shut down.
Okay.
And then, I tried to, after I shut it down, I had 1 year where I said, well, you got to be income qualified to at least pay it back at the 0%, and not one person applied.
Oh, 0%.
It was 0% loan.
0%.
We just want the principal back at some point.
Right.
Nobody could do it. Nobody could do it.
It was third,
That was
27 years
probably
ago. Remember the one they used to have? It was the home improvement. loan.
Yeah,
That was probably an
Yeah.
equity loan too.
That was it.
yeah.
Yeah,
And again,
they-
nobody could qualify, nobody could pay it back, and then the ones that did defaulted, and we foreclosed on about 10 people. We're kicking people out of their houses that we renovated 5 years ago.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we have a list of vacant homes?
I can't hear you.
Do we have a list of vacant homes?
Um,
Do we have a database?
I have a database of stuff where the water's turned off. I've got pieces but again, like if a apartment, Vienna Woods, I don't know how many apartments they have vacant at one time.
I feel like a vacant property registration wouldn't be a bad place to start. Now, I guess the question is, how long is it vacant before you take it to the next step? Maybe 6 months? If you know something's gonna be vacant for 6 months?
That's crazy.
Register it?
You would take, like, say, if a person passes and their family has to go to get their house transferred to their name, you would wanna go after that person, that they have to go through probate.
I'm just
because
saying that they
houses
should
are
tell
real.
the city or somebody should know it's gonna be vacant.
Yeah, I know, but 6 months, no, that would be too.
No, I'm just saying if you know it's gonna be vacant longer than 6 months, you should have to register it. Like, I don't wanna mess around registering something if I've got a rent on, it's gonna be
But
vacant.
then, these houses go through probate, and it takes
I'm just saying to
longer
let them know it's
I'm saying,
vacant.
but you can't say.
What purpose?
Yeah, for
In other words, now I know it's vacant.
Then let's say it's vacant, if it's still vacant after another 6 months, maybe then you do something. If it's vacant for another year, maybe then you do something. I think you probably need a registration. Because those census numbers, those seem, and I know nothing more than just being around the town,
Right.
but those seem awfully high to me.
That number seems high. I question if it's that high,
Well, then
but
how does the census decide that? Is it someone doesn't answer the door for their interview?
I'm,
You know?
again,
I mean, how
all I
do
can tell you is they're using the same thing for us that they're using for Butler County in Ohio. So whatever the standard is,
Yeah.
we are higher than
I think it'd
Butler
just be
County
nice
in
if
Ohio.
for our planning, and I guess you can't really do that, but if we had a better idea of what we're actually dealing with, and what situation.
Yeah,
Is it
but I'm
we're gonna
saying,
die?
that's why I'm saying 6 months is too soon, because a lot of times they don't even know who's gonna be the person that ends up with the house.
Right, I just meant that if it's vacant for 6 months, if you know it's gonna be vacant that long, then you should have to tell the city. Because I'm saying to protect the same situation. If I know something's gonna be vacant for 3 months, I don't wanna have to tell the city, it's 3 months. But if it's longer than that, I think everybody kinda should know that.
Maybe. Then if you got it registered, I have to have somebody take the
Yeah, I'm not
registration.
saying
Now I've got
anything, you have to
administrative costs.
registering it. I'm just saying you have to
And-
register it then.
Yeah. Again, those things all cost money. And the answer is I can put anything in place. Then I'm going to need manpower and stuff to do it. And we're going to have to monitor it. And you're going to have to let us know when it's not vacant and reoccupied. And we're going to, again, those are all,
Or maybe
those
a
all
year.
can be
If
done.
it's gonna be vacant longer than a year, register it.
yeah.
Something though.
Again,
Some kind of.
again, if it's the house at the top with the beautiful manicured lawn and it's vacant for a year, is it any of my business? I don't know. And then who am I to make the decision of that house is okay, but the $50,000 house, I think it might have mold in it and might be deteriorating to where he's not going to be able to give a loan. So at what point do I get involved as a government to say, it's been vacant a long time, I'm worried there's deterioration, so you need to let me into your house. You need to register it, you need to prove it, you need to let us inspect it, we could do any of that, or not. But these are the types of things that we're dealing with. How long do we leave it vacant? Again, if we're gonna have some kind of an ordinance that says vacancy, then why are we doing it? That's the first question. If it's okay, if it's property maintenance, if it's up to the code and we don't care, then why are we doing it? Or maybe we say, again, you have to register if a problem arises. Again, if I have to go out for an inspection because the grass is there, the trash is there, gutters falling on the floors, whatever, then maybe that's the time you got to do something. But right now, our water department has theoretically a local address of somebody to contact that if the grass isn't mowed, on the water records, I've got a local contact of some kind to track people down. And if you don't do it, I'll go mow your grass for you and put it on your tax bill. So again, do I need a vacant property ordinance to do that?
Maybe their homework assignment for the group would be to.
I apologize, I didn't hear you.
I was gonna say, maybe a homework assignment for the group might be to maybe put together a survey or a range of possibilities and let us stack rank them and then just share those with the group in a future meeting might be a good way.
I don't disagree with that. Do y'all up for a little homework?
Is this the first area that we want to tackle? Is that what you're saying?
Well, we started with the tax property, and we kind of I got a feel from you as to where the range of the order and all that of how we would look at property. Like I said, when we get into a certain neighborhood, we go, we're going to renovate these 4 streets. Well, then I can go, well, here's the 6 properties that are tax delinquent, and here's what's going on with each of those 6. What are we going to do with those 6? Then it'll be specific. This one's vacant lot. These 2 are vacant. These 2 are occupied. What are we doing? Because we're renovating everything on these 3 streets. But as a conceptual broad period, this is where we're going to start with vacant houses that we could reoccupy, vacant houses that would meet if it's in the industrial buffer, we could tear it down. One of the things, if you go ahead, one of the things that we could talk about is creating a matrix that we all signed on to that says basically for these different types, and I literally made these up. We can put anything we want in there. But for each of these, you get some number of points, and if it's higher than some number of points, it's subject to demolition. If it's under that, it should be rehabilitated. And you could say, is it in the city's industrial buffer? Is it through foreclosure? The cost to be, I can tell you when we were knocking down homes through the recession, if it was more than 50% of the house to put it back together, inside and out, that was our criteria. If it's more than, auditor says it's a $50,000 house, we had a pretty good software program that says, well, the furnace is out, the furnace is 40 years old, this needs to be done, it has mold remediation, da, 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 da. If it was over 25,000 that list, it got on the demo list. And that's where a lot of the properties that people were questioning about, the air conditioner was gone, furnace was 40 years old, it had mold, it had this, all the plumbing, copper had been taken out of the house. And by the time you added all those back in to make it habitable again, it was 25,000 plus to put that $50,000 house back together. No, we're tearing that down. It's out. It's 80 years old. It's whatever. 2-bedroom. We're getting rid of it. 2 bedrooms or less. We haven't gotten to these areas yet, but we've got way too many 2-bedroom houses. You could say, if we find one of those and it meets these other criteria, you could give that a little more points. If it's a 3 or more bedroom, it gets less points because those are probably better for us. Is it in a high crime area? Is it tax delinquent? You know, we could do any set of criteria we wanted to do, but the idea would be, hey, we found this vacant house. What's going on with this? And we apply the matrix. Well, when you apply the matrix to it, which again, I made that up totally off the top of my head, it should be demolished. Okay, well, if we demolish it, we're going to talk about vacant land at the next meeting. When we have vacant land, this is what we would do. Okay. That's our, we know what the matrix tells us what to do. We know what we're doing with vacant land. We move forward. It's supposed to be rehabilitation. Bang, we got it. We know what we're doing with rehabilitation of houses because we're going to use Dickie and all these other people to bring them back up and get them occupied in certain neighborhoods because it's there. If it's in the buffer that we said we should be clearing out around AK, if we all agree, no, if it's in this area, it's coming down, period. Over the, if we get our hands on it and have title to it, it's green space, period. That one's on its own, gone. So
It's like a lot of Oneida areas facing AK.
it is. That's true. It's exactly true. And they complain about their kids having asthma and they're having grime and stuff.
Step on the car.
Right.
In the sidewalks.
Right. And they're not wrong. But we've talked before, AK and Suncoke are within their EPA. They're legal. Occasionally, and we've said this before, occasionally something will belch, but they've got air monitoring stations, and the thing will go, bloop, it's out. They'll go, whoosh, turn it off. They self-report to the EPA. They fix whatever it is. They turn it back on. And again, 364 days out of the year, they're generally compliant within the EPA, within their permit. So the answer isn't AK and Suncoke. The answer is maybe you shouldn't be living there long term. Maybe that's not a place over the next 10 to 20 years. We should try to find them better places to live where they don't have to deal with that. That could be a policy. But the idea is we could create some kind of a matrix so that when we see a vacant house, we can say, this is our starting point. Okay, we haven't gotten to a lot of these yet, but as we get through all these, I could create a matrix based on these next 5, 10 sessions we go through, that when we see a vacant house, this is how we evaluate it. And once we evaluate it, if it's demolition, it becomes vacant land, and this is what we do with vacant land. If it's this, we rehabilitate it there. If it's 2-bedroom or less, we do this to it. And so again, the idea is to create this policy where these all tie together. And is it tax delinquent? Yes. Okay, we're going to get it. Now we have a vacant house. What are we going to do with it? We have a process. Once we figure out whether we're going to demolish or rehabilitate it, we know what to do to rehabilitate. We know what to do to demolish. If we demolish it, we know what to do with the vacant land because we've all tied it all together. This is how we move forward. And the idea is that the committee is involved, the committee signs off on it, we all agree, this is what the city needs to move forward. And then at the end, one of the last, I think that number 11 is what happens when we hurt people. Okay, if we agree this is the stuff that's right for the city, this is how we should handle things with the city, then the question is when we find somebody that is the exception to the rule, it's not vacant, it's whatever, it's, okay, somebody's going to get hurt on this one. How do we take care of them?
Thing is, people are concerned with is not getting what, it's just like a car. I had a wreck.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a nice blue station wagon, but when my niece had a wreck, you know, and it was someone else's fault and locked up the steering wheel, well, they said, okay, we're going to total your car out. But the problem was, when
Total
they had
didn't
book
cover the
value,
loan.
my car really, you know, could have been fixed. And so I was in college, but that car that I got to buy was a piece of crap in comparison to my brand new car that got locked steering wheels. They totaled out, you know, because I had it for 4 years.
But here's the problem with 50 years of
That's the problem with
neglect,
houses, yeah.
is that they keep going down. Those values are not
So
going
when they
up. They're
get-
going down. So the longer we wait to take care of this, the less value you're going to get on your house when we
So
get
if
to
they-
when we
if
get
they
there.
Get this house taken away from them, and then they go to find somewhere to live, and they can't find somewhere like another house in another neighborhood for the amount of money that they got.
Right?
And that's the,
And again, we can look at
then
some
what
of
do
the,
you do?
well, we talked about the land cooperative, where I own the land and you own the house, so that maybe I can transfer you to some place where you're, you know, your $25,000, I'll take your 25, I'm gonna pay you 25, your value, and I'm gonna put you in a $40,000 house that 25,000's the house and 15's the land. I own the land, you own the house, and maybe we can actually improve your housing, perhaps. But again, I'm gonna ask you, what's the government's role? Why, is that my problem?
yeah, you cut that grass. No,
Yeah, I mean, how far does my role go in
Right.
to your personal financial situation? At what point is it not my problem, it's your problem? And I understand
But the good
your
news is-
situation and your
But
circumstances
you have
and,
older people say they only got maybe 10 more years, you know.
right,
Then the land, the property reverts back to.
there's all kinds of ways to do it. We have property, there's some, you talked about the little old widow. We have a handful of properties that literally, if you pull up the code enforcement file, it says, wait till she dies and then we'll destroy it. Because the house is in terrible shape.
Yeah.
And she says, you'll take my cold dead corpse out of this house. I went, all right, we'll wait. You know, we probably will.
The thing about it is it really,
Right.
really good for that person to be living in
No,
that house?
but
and
I
that-
No.
You can't take her out of it kicking and screaming.
Well, actually, I can.
Oh, she can.
I can. I've got all the tools I need to do it.
Not everybody,
But-
not every old person's house is dilapidated.
Correct.
I'm saying we're
No.
talking just a few
Correct.
that are, that's it.
But we have a handful.
That's the thing. The thing is, not everyone is dilapidated.
No.
We're not talking about, we're not coming in and just destroying on. the
Yeah,
entire
if you're occupied and you're code compliant and your house is up, I won't ever know who you are. I'll never have reason to come into contact with you.
But I mean, I understand your need to try to do something, and I mean, I think that with the vacancy, I think the matrix concept is a good idea to move forward. And even possibly if, you know, I mean, it gets kind of hairy if it's a landowner and it's a vacant house. If it's a landlord and the house has been vacant for 2 and 3 years,
Well, I can,
then I don't see the, I mean,
Now-
maybe I'm wrong.
I'm gonna put him on the spot because I can tell you, if you're a landlord and you let it sit under the code, I can just demolish it out from under you.
Well, yeah,
And if
or
you're an
either
out-of-town
charge
landlord,
them the
I can condemn it.
$5,000, or either charge them the $5,000 a year that you were
Let me,
talking about.
they won't pay that. I mean,
Okay.
most of these landlords, most of these houses that are out, you're gonna find that most rental properties in Middletown that are owned by local people keep the houses in fairly decent shape.
Predominantly, that's true.
Most of the crap out there right now that is rental property are owned by people living in Kansas City, Los Angeles, New York, even Vandalia, Ohio. They could live
Yeah.
just as close as 25 miles away, but they don't give a crap about.
They've never been to Middletown since they bought the property. Maybe if they're from out of state, they've never been to Middletown, ever.
Well, I mean, I don't really see where trying to help them if they're not even concerned and they have vacant houses is an area that we should be
Oh, those are the houses we should take away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's
I
the
mean, I
low-hanging
do-
fruit.
I mean,
Yeah.
I do feel like that's at like one step in the right direction, that if they are not here and they don't care and their houses are vacant and they look a mess, then that's an area that we could say, you know, because we're gonna have so many tough decisions, and that is kinda clear cut because it's not affecting anyone really.
Sounds like a local ownership is another line.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And it certainly can be. It should be, yeah. These are the kind of things, like I said, I'm trying to come up with something that the community perceives as fair that moves us forward, that again, when I take this action, people go, well, yeah, I understand they're trying to renovate this. Because here's the thing, you know, it's like talk about property maintenance. Let's say I make everybody on this street, we do infill construction, we do everything we're supposed to do. We pave the streets, we do the sidewalks, we do everything we're supposed to do. And I got the one person here who, through no fault of their own, is living in poverty and can't fix up their house and can't do what they need to do. And now I've made everybody else in the entire street get on the game. How is it fair if I don't make them do it too? You made all of us get code compliant, do whatever it is that we needed to be done, and why is it fair that she gets to because she's poor? And that's where these things start to get hairy. Well, I can't make 29 out of 30 and say, she's poor, it's not her fault. Well, it's not her fault. It truly is not her fault. For whatever reason, life's dealt her a bad set of cards. But if I'm fixing the street, I gotta fix the street. I gotta assess the property for the sidewalks. I gotta, you know, whatever it is we think we're doing to renovate this street in this neighborhood, I gotta be able to do it to everybody. I gotta do everything I can to help, but if you're gonna fix it, we gotta fix it.
Yeah, well, I mean, but unfortunately, living in Middletown, that's gonna be,
Well, and that's been the problem. The longer we wait, the worse it's going to be. Those conditions are deteriorating, the streets are deteriorating, the houses are deteriorating, the values are going down. The longer we wait to take action, the worse the problem is going to continue to get. Haven't done anything for 55 years because of these issues. Again, we can do it or not. But you see the problem. I can't, either we fix it or we don't. I can renovate the neighborhood. I promise you, I can renovate the neighborhood. I got the tools. I can do everything I need to do. But I can't have, if the community's gonna, you know, raise up and just go after council and go for my job and everything else, I'll look at you and go, continue to live in squalor. No problem. You just made my job a lot easier. I got 10 more years. I'm good. But you can't complain then when I go to other neighborhoods and fix theirs up and I let yours deteriorate more. God, you know, it's either you fix it or you don't. It really gets down to that. I got all these tools. Get homes, to get vacant homes, to get vacant land, to do things. I got all these tools. I got the property maintenance code. Are you going to let me in or not? It's up to you. It's up to them, really. But you understand?
Doug, are you of the opinion that whatever we come up with and gets implemented to pick neighborhood A,
Yep.
that when people in neighborhood B, C, D, and E see what neighborhood A's doing, then they'll go, hey, maybe we ought to reconsider.
I think there'll be some of that. And then again, there's going to be, if you take a neighborhood of 400 houses, there's going to be some percentage that
Oh, sure.
that we're going to hurt. We're going to hurt some people. If I do 400 anything,
Gotta have a.
99% of
you
it
gotta have a
right,
plan For planning, you gotta have a plan B for those people.
I got to have some kind of plan B. But again, the question is what
Just
is
to
the role of
displace
government?
people, not the absentee landlords.
No,
I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree. But again, how far does that program go? At what is the government's responsibility? How far does and that's kind of what I'm asking, what's that line in the sand where if we go this far, we're not overburdening the taxpayers, but we're being fair to the people who need help. There has to be a line that, at least about here, where people go,
Property owners.
I don't like it, but yeah, it's probably about all the city's responsible for.
They're not renters necessarily, property owners.
Yeah?
That's what I'm saying.
Well, how about renters? I'm going after
Renters will take
a
that
bad landlord and there's
Just
somebody
said
living
that
there.
There was a
The
big
renter's
issue
gonna-
with transient.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So to me, I mean, and that's, I mean, and
That- I don't think
I
that they
hate
fall-
to feel that way about people who, but people who have lived here in Middletown all of their lives. Like, I mean, we have people at our
House
church
owners.
like that. That to me, to
Yeah.
have to displace a 70 to 80-year-old person, to
Yeah,
me,
I got a lot on my street. My whole street is
right,
old.
that's what gets to me. But you have the renters here, a lot of them are very
You'll
transient.
find someone
Mhm.
So at the end of the day, they're gonna, at some point, they're gonna get mad and leave anyway,
We got a lot of vacant houses, they can go there.
you know? So, I guess, to me,
Steve got a house for him.
that's my.
No, I could tell you, you know, that you're saying what's going to happen is there's going to be 80 landlords. Instead of the south end, it's going to be 80 landlords at the meeting saying, what are you doing? My house is up to code if it's vacant and this and that and the other, and it's none of your,
Probably won't bother that
none of your
house.
dang business,
Yeah, if it's not up to code.
all right? So these are all the things that, you know, the community has to be entrenched enough and in the game enough that if I take these actions, council supports it and the community supports it. And if the landlords complain, too bad. If we're being fair to the south end and it hurts some people and we've done what we agree is as far as the government should go, that this group and everyone else stands up and goes, no, we have to, it's been 55 years, we have to fix this neighborhood. It's time to go, guys.
We're really gonna have to do some grassroots action.
You are.
I mean, he's a landowner, so he could be a person who works, you know, him and Dickie, they could be like in that landowners, and I mean, that's really what, in order to get what we're looking for.
Yeah.
So that you don't have, so that you minimize.
Slumlords.
Well,
so that you
and
minimize the hurt.
yeah,
We'll have to do some grassroots, have people out there just really trying to talk to people about
I agree.
things.
And we talked about at the very first meeting going from unoccupied to rentals to, you know, in other words, out of town to in town. The very last people that we should go do something to would be homeowners.
Yeah.
But if you're going to fix all 40 houses on the street, at some point I will get, okay, we foreclosed on the delinquent, we got the landlords taken care of, we got this taken care of, we're down to, there are 3 homeowners that have a problem that I can't fix for them. And that's where I need you guys, just the community, to say, yeah, we're going to have to, if we're going to fix the street, we're going to have to try to figure out what to do with those 3 people. You know, then do we get the churches involved? Do we get the nonprofits involved? Do we, as far as the government can go to help in this situation? But again, if you're going to fix it, I got to fix it.
But in that same vein, you have improved values.
Mhm.
So the people of those houses, those 3 houses, their value should rise, maybe not proportionally, but they will rise, so maybe someone will say, let me buy your house.
Now I can't pay my property taxes, you idiot. You've run me out of my house for property taxes. And you assessed me for the sidewalks, you've destroyed me. That's, there it is, gentrification,
It's happening right now as we speak, isn't it?
right? This is why if you're going to fix the neighborhoods, again, we've talked about, as council, with council about setting up some areas where if we're renovating in this area, maybe we can waive increases in property tax, basically a community reinvestment area that I can protect you for some number of years, that if the values go up, your property taxes won't. But even that would have a finite period, 5 years, 10 years. And if your house goes from 50,000 to 80,000, because we've done all these wonderful things and whatever, in 10 years, you're going to be right back where you were, where you've had to keep the house up. And if I've assessed you for the sidewalks and now, well, and again, in 10 years, maybe you sell it, take the 30 grand but again, move somewhere else. These are the problems. These are real situations that I can fix it. I can do some things to protect you. I can do some things to help you with repairs. But if you're going to renovate the neighborhood, you have to renovate the neighborhood.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Would there be anything wrong with, in real estate, in asset management, you have a house, sometimes they're tenants, sometimes they're the owners. I think a lot of the people that you're speaking of would probably have an absentee landlord. The house is in terrible shape. They are stuck in the house. They don't have enough money to go rent a new house. They don't have their first month's rent in their deposit. A lot of times we use cash for keys. Is that something?
I'm not familiar with that.
So the way it works is you have a house, the bank says we foreclosed on it, there's still people living in there. They have an agreement, you go to the tenant, they say, I think the most I've ever seen for cash for keys was, I don't Yeah, something like that. Go to them, you say, most of the time it's $1,200 to $2,000. Here's this, we'll give it to you once you've vacated the property, which I know that might be hard because they gotta find somewhere else to go. But that might be a way of getting them and helping them. They'd have enough for first month's rent and their deposit. And, I mean, you're not necessarily helping the property owner, 'cause you're not giving it to them, you're helping the occupants. That's something we do in real estate.
For tenants, huh?
Yeah.
For tenants.
Yeah. Just an idea.
No,
Something we use in our
it's
community.
not a terrible idea. Again, we'd have to fund it and
Well,
again,
it'd be in those special circumstances where, you know,
But we're-
nowhere else to go.
yeah, we're displacing a tenant who's done nothing wrong,
Right, right.
which we have those. You know, bad landlord who,
Fundings.
I mean, we've had landlords that bought a property and never paid a dime of, you know, collected rent for 3 years and never paid a dime in property tax or maintenance, and eventually they get foreclosed on and they don't care because they've collected $700 a month for 36 months. That was
They
a,
made their money.
yeah. They put the minimum down when they bought it at sheriff's sale, and that's their business model.
Yeah.
There was that company out of Kansas or somewhere, it was on Cincinnati News, the biggest debtor for real estate property taxes in the county. And I forget how many
They
hundreds
weren't
of
even here.
thousands of dollars. He said, well, we're not getting enough cash to pay that, so we're just not paying it. We'll work out a plan.
Yeah.
Very cavalier.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to take too much more of your time, but where am I going with vacant property? Yeah, I can, as we get through, do you all like the matrix idea of if we have a vacant property, we evaluate it on whatever criteria? Like I said, as we go through these other criteria with property maintenance and this and that and the other, I can build you a matrix and say, here's the beginning matrix of what it would look like. Now let's fine tune it as a group. But yeah, because I don't,
Make it vacant for how long?
well, that's the question. Do we?
I think a year.
That's where we should probably go through that grading system.
Yeah.
Right,
Matrix is a good idea.
yeah.
The grading.
And I think, you know, if the property taxes haven't been paid for a year, they're probably not gonna be paid, period.
Well, that would be more cases than not, I think that's
And I
true.
think we should use that as our criteria. We have to come up with a fine,
Let me play with the matrix a little more and send it out to everybody. And then why don't you all, if you have time, if you would, mark it
So
up.
I'm saying property taxes for a year is like, what, $600 or something maybe?
Depends on the house, yeah.
Yeah, so why not 2 years?
well, I mean, what it could be as simple as this, okay? At 1 year, we notify the person that's
So you're
supposed
looking at it.
and saying, hey, look, you know, here's what we are. Our city has set up these rules, and if you don't get it in compliance and pay those taxes within 30 days of the 1 year, then you're gonna lose it.
Right.
You give them the
Then we will-
opportunity.
we
You try
will-
to talk to them and communicate, and that's all we can do as a
So
city.
don't we have some that have been vacant for 4 years or so?
Sure.
So I'm saying, let's start with the oldest and work to
Oh,
the
sure,
newer,
we-
you know,
yeah.
I mean, you know,
I
when
got
I
it.
say 1 year, then it's a house over here that you want. So, okay, well, we said 1 year, no, I think you start with older ones and work your way up, you know, in the neighborhoods that you're kind of targeting, you know.
I gotta see if I
think
have
it's
the
same.
ability to age them.
I
I'm
mean,
not
you know,
sure.
It's like,
Well,
is
I'm
it
trying to come
a
to the
interior
matrix.
motive?
Yeah.
Because why are we
Right.
saying 1
That's why
year?
the matrix is so good.
Let me play with the matrix. Let me send it out to everybody. And then
Now,
I
this
want you to
guy
mark it
here
up.
He's had this house, he ain't paid taxes in 5 years, and you just went after this, guy who just lost his job and just got a new job, and we going after him for 1 year, and here's a guy over here, been out of that place for
Well,
5 years.
as I say, you try to communicate with the guy.
Different than
Yeah,
vacant.
because, you know, this house is closer to downtown, so I just wanna tear it down, you know what I'm saying? So let's be reasonable here, and
Well, that's what the matrix is for, like if it was
Yeah.
somebody
Have an
who lost
objective
their job,
evaluation,
he would be able to determine.
I'll send you two things. I'll send you the matrix and I'll beef it up a little bit. And I want you to just mark the crap out of it. What about this? How about this? That seems dumb. Don't put that. This one needs more weight than that one. Anything that's on your mind, mark it up. And we'll try to gather those up and turn them into, okay, from everything you guys said, y'all pretty much agreed on these. These three, there's some disagreement. Let's talk about what we want to do with them. And then let me also send you the vacant property ordinance. Can you back up? How hard is it to back up one? There, that one. Let me also send that one out so that you guys can, if you're gonna do something with vacant property, what do you all think about, you know, how much do we care about liability insurance? How much do we care about the plan for reuse? How much do we care? Yeah, these are important, these are not, because again, could even get into the matrix, could combine them in some way that, so let me play with that a little bit. I'm on vacation for the next week, so it'll be a little bit of time.
So
Yes, ma'am.
actually, I printed out the PowerPoint, so they already have it.
Okay, well, I will,
Oh, it's a little small.
yeah, I'll,
Just gotta figure out how to get
I got
that.
all that. I got all that. Randy can read it.
So are you gonna,
go ahead, if go on to the, and one more.
so you're gonna send it to us?
So I will send out a little bit of homework. I'll get you guys out of here. We'll meet back on July 12th, and we'll talk about vacant residential land, vacant lots. We'll talk about how we can do infill. We'll talk about if we can't do infill. I mean, I've got the places out there where they've done parking lots and basketball courts and pocket parks and, you know, side yards, all kinds of stuff. So that's where we'll head on July 12th. And again, I hope as you're starting to see is we have a tax delinquent property and we're going to foreclose. Once we foreclose, we have either a lot or a house. If it's a house, this is what we're going to do. If it's a lot, this is what we're going to do. If it's in the buffer, this is what we're going to do. If, you know, do we want a certain amount of home ownership? How do we promote that? Do we care, what do we care about rental property and how do we want to factor that? The idea is by the time we get down to 12, we know that when we see this, we do that. And it makes sense why we're doing that. Why did we select that? Why did we take that action? What's the end result that we're hoping to get to? So that then at some point we can go back out in the community and say, this is what we're thinking, this is why we're thinking that, this is what we think the benefit to the neighborhood will be long term, and this is how we would protect you if you're going to be impacted by what we're doing. That's where we're trying to get to. Okay. I appreciate your time, and I'm sorry I keep you a little bit late.
Hey,
Thank you.
Nadine, could you show Wanda how to get onto the website and see this stuff?
I gave you the little information thing.
I may not be here because my parents will be in town.
Okay.